Ladies and gentlemen, this next segment of the podcast is brought to you by the Heritage Foundation. For over 50 years, the Heritage Foundation has been America's outpost in Washington, fighting against the D.C. federal bureaucracy and working to secure a future that allows Americans to flourish. You see, for too long, conservative principles have been ignored by many of the very leaders claiming to fight for America. But the Heritage Foundation is proud to hold our leaders accountable and stand up for America's founding principles, paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Well, birthright citizenship case in front of the Supreme Court. Really two issues, the issue of birthright citizenship and these national injunctions. We pulled some audio here that I think you're going to find fascinating. This is, of course, in my zone. And so we're going to spend most, if not all, the first hour on this, breaking it down for you so you understand on multiple levels what's taking place. I've talked about birthright citizenship behind this microphone for 20 years. I've talked about it on Fox. I think it goes back to like 2012 or something the first time I talked about it. I've written about it. It's all the basic information that has been used in the public square. Is information that I researched, analyzed, developed, and discussed and wrote about. And we're going to approach this from multiple vantage points. The arguments that are being made, the conduct of the justices, what your Constitution compels, the 14th Amendment, the power of the judiciary. We're going to take a look at all this because it's relevant to your life. Now, what's amazing, even though I don't address birthright citizenship per se in my new book on power, this falls right into the category, as some of the other things do, of what I write about in the book. So let's take a look at this. Let's listen into some of this first. You'll be disappointed, of course, with Amy Coney Barrett. She's gone to the dark side. That's just the way it is. She's gone to the dark side. But let's start with Brown. Ketanji Brown Jackson. Birthright citizenship case today. The Solicitor General is John Sauer, who was President Trump's lawyer in the Supreme Court in the immunity debate, where he did very well. Immunity case. Cut 6, go.
I would think we'd want the system to move as quickly as possible to reach the merits of the issue and maybe have this court decide whether or not the government is entitled to do this under the law.
Now, hold on now. So what she's talking about are these nationwide injunctions. So her justification, which is perverse, it's a perverse logic. Her justification is, well, why wouldn't you want this so it gets quickly to the U.S. Supreme Court? Well, why would it get more quickly to the U.S. Supreme Court if you have a district court that makes a decision that's worthy of Supreme Court review? Then the court should take that up quickly from the appellate court. But that is not a justification for power being ceded to hundreds and hundreds of federal district courts. There's nothing in our history, nothing in our Constitution, nothing in any judiciary act that empowers federal trial courts to do any such thing. So Justice Jackson is basically a hack in a black robe. That's what she is. You can bet your mortgage. You can bet whatever you want on where she's going to come down on these big constitutional issues. You can bet it. It's always centralized power. It's always what I call, and I call it in the book, I coin a number of phrases, the deconstitutionalization of our government. She's deconstitutionalizing our government. Go ahead.
Having universal injunctions actually facilitate that. It seems to me that when the government is completely enjoined from doing the thing it wants to do, it moves quickly to...
So this is a speech on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of like-minded radical left-wing judges. She was one. I believe she moved from the district court to the Supreme Court, the district court in Washington. And so you see what she's saying. Well, if we can have these nationwide injunctions, then the Supreme Court essentially will be forced to take it up relatively quickly. That is so perverse. Well, maybe they should seize other powers, forcing the Supreme Court to take the case up relatively quickly. No? Go ahead.
Appeal that to get it to the Supreme Court, and that's actually what we would want. What I worry about is similar to what Justice Kagan points out, is that if the government is saying no lower court can completely enjoin it, it actually means that the government just keeps on doing the purportedly unlawful thing, and it delays the ability for this court to reach the underlying issue.
Now, what did she just say? She just said, with a national injunction, we'll get to the Supreme Court more quickly. Then she says, the problem with this is if a lower court is restricted to their district, which is what they're supposed to be, then the government just keeps doing whatever it wants. Maybe it's an unlawful thing. Well, why is that? The Supreme Court can still take up the appeal from the appellate court, the circuit court, whether it's in a district court. You don't need a district court having a national injunction. In fact, I would argue, contrary to her logic, that if you have a district court where the government is basically continuing to do illegal things, as she puts it, why wouldn't you? The case comes up to the appellate court and then goes to the Supreme Court. So listen to me carefully. I'm trying to explain this in plain English. You have a district court. They put in an injunction in the district court. They believe what the government's doing is illegal, but the government continues to do it in all the other districts. So you appeal the district court decision if you're an attorney, and you take it to the circuit court. There's not 700 circuit courts. And then from the circuit court, then you can go to the Supreme Court. So if the Supreme Court's worried that in all these other federal districts or all these other circuits, the government's violating the law, it still can take up the case. It takes up the case from the district to the circuit to the Supreme Court. None of that changes. None of it. The absurdity of what she's arguing, and Kagan, they got the three stooges in on this. They're trying to get the fourth stooge. The four women on the court. They're trying to get Barrett. Probably will. This really is cut and dry. This isn't even controversial. Let's go to Clarence Thomas. Cut 7. Go.
General, when were the first universal injunctions used?
We believe that the best reading of that is what you said in Trump against Hawaii, which is that Wirtz in 1963 was really the first universal injunction. There's a dispute about Perkins against Lucan's Oil going back to 1940. And of course, we point to the court's opinion that reversed that universal injunction issued by the D.C. Circuit and said it's profoundly wrong. Now, if you look at the cases that the either party cite, you see a common theme. The cases that we cite, like National Treasury's Employment Union, Perkins against Lukens Oil, Frothingham and Massachusetts against Mellon, going back to Scott against Donald, and all of those are cases where the court considered and addressed the sort of universal, in that case, statewide issue of provision of injunctive relief. So when the court has considered and addressed this, it has consistently said you have to limit the remedy to the plaintiffs who appearing in court and complaining of that remedy.
So we survived until the 1960s without universal injunctions.
That's exactly correct. And in fact, those are very limited.
Stop. This is too important. This guy's a genius, Clarence Thomas. No wonder they try to destroy him. His point is, all the way up to 1963, we never really had universal injunctions. For almost 200 years, 180 years, give or take, we didn't have universal injunctions. We didn't have them. And now you have Jackson and Kagan and Sotomayor and no doubt Barrett making the case. Well, you can get your case to the Supreme Court more quickly. Why? What does that have to do with anything? Let's say, again, as a footnote, you take a case to a judge in Boston, a federal district court in Boston. In Boston, let's say, is the jurisdiction. And you bring that case and you're the government, and somebody brings the case against you and you're the government, and the case brought against you, the court puts in place a temporary injunction. But the government can continue to do what it's doing in all these other jurisdictions. And Jackson says, so the government can continue to act illegally in all these other jurisdictions. Well, who says the government's acting illegally in all these other jurisdictions? Maybe that judge in Boston is wrong. Maybe the government's not acting illegally or unconstitutionally. So she's making a pretty broad assumption. But putting that aside, the case in Boston winds up, I think it's the Second Circuit over there, not sure, goes to the appellate court, the Second Circuit. But whatever it's called, it doesn't appellate court. And after the appellate court, you can appeal to the Supreme Court. So whether it comes out of a single district or it comes out of a national injunction, the Supreme Court still can take a whack at it. So Jackson makes absolutely no sense. She demonstrates she's an idiot and an ideologue, in my humble opinion. And then we have Clarence Thomas saying, okay, how did we survive without this for most of our history? Go ahead.
In the 1960s, it really exploded in 2007 in our cert petition in Summers against Earth Island Institute. We pointed out that the Ninth Circuit had started doing this in a whole bunch of cases involving environmental claims.
Mm-hmm. Ninth Circuit. Remember when the Ninth Circuit was crazy ass? That's why Jackson likes it, Kagan likes it, Sotomayor likes it, unfortunately, Barrett. Then we get into this issue. Well, let's let it play out. This is the Solicitor General, John Sawyer, really sharp guy. And Barrett, cut 8, go.
General Sauer, I want to ask you about a potential tension. Well, no, not potential tension, an actual tension that I see in answers that you gave to Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Kagan. You resisted Justice Kagan when she asked you whether the government would obey within the Second Circuit a precedent. I'm distinguishing between opinions and judgments here. Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent, say, in New York, because you might disagree with the opinion?
Our general practice is to respect those precedents, but there are circumstances when it is not a categorical practice. It is, and that is not
this administration's practice or the longstanding practice of the federal government. And I'm not talking about in the Fourth Circuit, are you going to respect a Second Circuit? I'm talking about within the Second Circuit. And can you say, is that this administration's practice or a longstanding one?
As I understand it, longstanding policy of the Department of Justice. Yes, that we generally, as it was phrased to me, generally respect circuit precedent, but not necessarily in every case. And some examples might be a situation where we're litigating to try and get that circuit precedent overruled and so forth.
Well, okay, so I'm not talking about a situation in which, the Second Circuit has a case from 1955 and you think it's time for it to be challenged. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this kind of situation. I'm talking about this week, the Second Circuit holds that the executive order is unconstitutional, and then what do you do the next day or the next week?
Generally, we follow those.
So you're still saying generally?
Yes.
And you still think
Well, I'll tell you why he's saying generally, Justice. Because the extent to which you people in the courts, particularly the activists on the circuit courts, and particularly activists on the Supreme Court, have taken the judiciary is way out of bounds from the constitutional construct. That's what he's saying or trying to say. The circuit issues a ruling, right? Let's say the circuit issues a ruling. An emergency hearing gets to the circuit, goes from the district court to the circuit, and let's say it involves national security. Let's say it involves something about a battlefield decision or a military decision by the president. And the circuit, and look, this isn't even beyond imagination. It's going on in Israel right now with their out-of-control courts, and we're getting close. We're getting close with the pullback of the planes from Venezuela filled with, or I should say El Salvador, filled with Venezuelan criminals. And let's say the Second Circuit says, no, Mr. President, this is the way that's to be handled in the battle and so forth. And he's saying we reserve the right to reject that. There you have literally a conflict of the branches where the commander-in-chief, the executive branch, has by far the better constitutional argument. And she's saying, are you telling me you wouldn't comply with the order? Are you telling me you wouldn't comply with the... I wouldn't comply with an order that affected what's going on a battlefield or a military decision. Absolutely not. And she's appalled by that. So she seems to think the power of the courts are more powerful than the power of the Constitution. Well, judicial review, we get to make the final decision. Where the hell did that come from? An 1803 decision. That's not in the Constitution either. I'm just making the point that what the Solicitor General Sauer is saying is correct. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Folks, the first 100-plus days of the Trump presidency has been astonishing, and the Heritage Foundation has been keeping track. Americans were sick and tired of the status quo in Washington, D.C., and that had led to a border crisis and an erosion of family life in America. They sent President Trump back to Washington with a mandate to restore American greatness. And the good news is that America's back. Now, if you want to see exactly how he did it, go to heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. To get your free list of Trump's 100 wins in 100 days. The Heritage Foundation has been counting wins in the first 100 days since President Trump's new administration took office. And I'm sure you can name many of those wins, from taking steps to secure our border to cutting government waste. But the Heritage Foundation has a comprehensive list of the top 100 wins so far. So go to heritage.org/Levin and get your list. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. We only have a minute. When we return, Sam Alito, you'll see his genius at work, and he's absolutely genius. You'll see Elena Kagan. You'll see why she's nothing of the sort. And so we'll get into this, and then he has to deal with Sotomayor. But this shouldn't even be controversial. It shouldn't be a left-right thing. These national injunctions, they're a disgrace. There's no authority for this whatsoever. It creates chaos. You can see the argument that Jackson made. It's absolutely feeble and embarrassing. Even Barrett, she can't think of a single case where the executive branch would reject an order from a circuit. How about if the three-judge panel or even the full circuit is way out of line? Maybe they issue some kind of Dred Scott decision. Should the executive branch go along with that? I'll be right back. Folks, if you're like me, You've been closely watching President Trump's first 100 days, watching as he fulfills his campaign promises and the mandate he was given by the American people. And I'm happy to report that the Heritage Foundation identified 100 of President Trump's biggest wins for Americans in his first 100 days in office. Now, if you go to heritage.org/Levin today, that's heritage.org/Levin, you can get your free copy of the Heritage Foundation's list of Trump's 100 wins in 100 days. Everyone knows some of what he's done, from securing the border to protecting women and girls in sports. But you have to see the full list of what his administration has accomplished in only 100 days. It's truly astonishing. I've seen this list. You need to go see it too. Go to heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin. Get your free copy of 100 Wins in 100 Days. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Mark Levin, an unapologetic patriot and unapologetic constitutionalist. You can reach him at 877-381-3811.
Elena Kagan. Cut 10, go.
So, General, on this question of expedition, I mean, it sort of depends on the government's own actions in a case like this one, where one can expect that there is not going to be a great deal of disagreement among the lower courts. I mean, let's assume that you lose in the lower courts pretty uniformly.
All right, let's stop right there. What does that have to do with anything? So you lose in the lower courts, and you lose in a bunch of lower courts. Didn't Chuck Schumer say he helped put 235 progressive lawyers on the courts to thwart Trump? So it's likely you're going to lose in several of these courts. And so her argument seems to be give them more power. Give them more power, you see? That way, the Supreme Court might consider taking up the case. Now, let's say the Supreme Court's made up of a bunch of leftists. I don't think the Supreme Court will take up the case very quickly at all. But again, this has nothing to do with anything. The process is in place, whether it's one court, 25 courts, whether it's one court with a national injunction or one court with an injunction that is within the jurisdiction of the court, the district. The process is the same. You appeal to a circuit court, then you file a writ of certiorari with the Supreme Court. They either take it or they don't. So what does any of this have to do with anything? And if you're leftists on the court and you got all this going on with your swell brothers and sisters in black robes, your ideological colleagues and comrades, you're not going to take it up if they rule the way you want them to rule. So there's no quick path to this. There's no guarantee to that. The whole thing is absurd. Go ahead.
And that you never take this question to us. I mean, I noticed that you didn't take the substantive question to us. You only took the nationwide injunction question to us. I mean, why would you take the substantive question to us? You're losing a bunch of cases, this guy over here, this woman over here, you know, they'll have to be treated as citizens, but nobody else will. Why would you ever take this case to us?
Well, in this particular case, we have deliberately not presented the merits to this court on the question of the scope of remedies, because, of course, that makes it a clean vehicle where the court doesn't have to look at the past.
You're ignoring the import of my question.
No, but you're ignoring what he's saying. Which is, if they seek the remedy that you're talking about, listen carefully, America, I'm going to try and put this in non-lawyerese here, then you frog jump over the issue of the process. So if he goes in and says, look, and I'm sure they sat down and they figured this out, what are we bringing to the Supreme Court exactly? And he's saying, if we go to remedies, then you're going to say, what's the problem with the nationwide injunction? Here you are, now you're asking for a remedy. And so what he's saying now is, no, I'm not asking for a remedy, I'm challenging the process. And she says, you're not answering my question. No, he is answering. When they say that, it's so frustrating. Go ahead.
Saying that in a case in which the government is losing constantly, there's nobody else who's going to appeal, they're winning, it's up to you to decide whether to take this case to us. If I were in your shoes, there is no way I'd approach the Supreme Court.
Okay, that's fine. But you're the one who's missing the point. They have to make a decision. Challenge the process or get a remedy. You're just telling him, if I were you, I'd never seek a remedy. They're not seeking a remedy. They're challenging the process. They're taking on nationwide injunctions. Go ahead.
You just keep on losing in the lower courts.
Oh, my
and
God.
What's supposed to happen to prevent that?
Again, I respectfully disagree with that forecast of the merits, but in response to the question, what I would say is we have an adversarial system, and if the government is not, for example, not respecting circuit precedent on the court's hypothetical in the Second Circuit, someone injured in the Second Circuit could take the case up, and they could say, look, the government is violating circuit precedent on the hypothetical multiple circuits.
That's the case we're going to take? Somebody who says...
You know, this is so stupid, just so you know, non-lawyer. The whole discussion is stupid. It's just stupid. Substantive versus process. Why don't you deal, Justice, with the case that they brought, rather than suggesting, and you could have brought the substance and sought a remedy, and you did. But we didn't. We brought the process. Because we have a huge problem. And she says, oh, you're losing in court after court after court. Why don't you bring us up on the chat? I'll tell you why. And he would never say it in front of the court. Because he's dealing with a bunch of ambulance chasing, slip and fall, radical left-wing, Democrat lawyers. He's not bringing it up on the substance, which they may do in another case. He's bringing up the process that's being abused. That's why they keep losing. All right. Let's go to cut 11. I could be wrong. I haven't heard this. I'm just looking at the cryptic notes here that maybe she actually asks a good question of the other side, but I'm not sure. I'll know once we play it. Cut 11, go.
Here's what I worry about here, Ms. Corcoran, is that this case is very different from a lot of our nationwide injunction cases in which many of us have expressed frustration.
Yes, including you. When nothing was on the line, when she was doing an interview, caught on video, she condemned nationwide injunctions. Now, she's not so sure. Now, in this case, it looks like she's going to ask a very interesting question or pose a very interesting problem. But you could hear with the Solicitor General representing the Trump administration, she was all in. Go ahead.
And, you know, the typical way in which that frustration emerges is that legal questions are hard and they're complicated, and different courts would decide them differently. And instead, because of the forum selection process, a party goes to one place. You know, in the first Trump administration, it was all done in San Francisco. And then in the next administration, it was all done in Texas. Right. And there is a big problem that is created by that mechanism.
Wow,
and
that's a good question. Good for you. Let's see where this goes. Go ahead.
The questions to you and to General Feigenbaum, which is like, you know, your third buckets, which are, if it's like super important, or if it's quintessentially national, or whatever the way, you know, is not going to solve our problem for that set of cases, which is not this case. This case, what's problematic about it is that the courts keep deciding the same way.
He told you already he's not raising the substantive remedy issue. So why do you keep bringing it up? He told you he's brought this case, and I'm going to tell you why he brought it. It was the fastest one they could get to the Supreme Court. That's why they brought it up. He says he wants you to look at the process. The process. The lower courts. Way out of their lane with these national injunctions. And you keep bringing up the substance, which is not what he's challenging. Go ahead.
That the lower courts are going to do anything different. Right. And for that reason.
No offense, it would be anything differently. Just telling the justice. Go ahead.
The catch me if you can problem that Justice Jackson said, and the problem of how are we ever going to get a case here. But our general.
Oh, good God. You know how you get a case there when it's appealed to you, Justice? You take it. That's how you get a case there. That is a problem without a remedy, because there's no problem. You decide, four of you, what cases you're going to take up. This is becoming stupider by the audio clip. Go ahead.
like that. And I just want you to sort of comment on that.
Yeah, I'd say first that the government's proposal of channeling through Rule 23 does nothing to solve anything you just described. I think the limiting principles that I was proposing, which again was just me trying to reflect back to the court, kind of the through lines that it's been identifying.
This is why people hate lawyers. You have a black and white issue, right and wrong. Where's the authority for lower courts to issue nationwide injunctions? There is no authority. Not in the Constitution or anywhere else. But the courts, these leftists on the courts, they don't even want to start at first principles. They want nothing to do with first principles. So why didn't you argue the substance and seek a remedy? You keep losing these cases. Well, we know why they keep losing these cases, don't we? That's part of the process problem, isn't it? Oh, and then you want to get it to the Supreme Court faster? Wouldn't you want nationwide injunctions? What does that have to do with anything? It gets to the Supreme Court quickly or not quickly, whether it's in one jurisdiction with a single injunction for the activities between those parties and in that jurisdiction, or whether it's nationwide. It's the same process. You can seek emergency appeals. The court can take them or not take them. So that's kind of stupid. That's a non-argument. Doesn't even make any sense. And then this bird brain goes on about different buckets, and I'm talking about the litigant here. Go ahead.
If this court were to articulate them, it would cut back on the number of universal injunctions. Is it a facial challenge? Does it involve a fundamental constitutional right? Right. Those are concrete.
So what she's saying is, let's create a tiering process, because the court loves to create law and tiering processes. They like to set policy. A tiering process is a policy process. And so the court, she's saying in the first instance, has to decide how important the case is. Is it a constitutional case? Is it a statutory case? Is it an administrative law case? Is it this case or that case? Look at this. Look at what a mess the leftists are creating. There should be no nationwide injunctions. The only court that can issue a nationwide decision is the Supreme Court. And the only reason we're here is because Donald Trump is president. The lower courts, mostly Democrat, 90-some%, are completely out of control. We don't need new buckets. This isn't an issue of process versus substantive remedies. It has nothing to do with any of it. Go ahead.
You know, Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence.
All right, shut up. Sorry, this is painful, especially for me. I hate to say this, Mr. Producer. Let's go to one more before we take a break. I feel sorry for Solicitor General Sauer. Now it's Sotomayor, the dumbest of the dumb. Cut 12, go.
Here, there's a discrete identified group on one issue. Does citizenship mean...
we're actually getting to birthright citizenship now. Go ahead.
Are you born in the territory of the United States, or does it mean, are you loyal to someone else, which is your claim? Or are
it's
you
not his claim. Your claim. So now, black and white textual constitutional law, where we have the history, where we have the speeches, where you have the authors who make that point. It's now a claim. You see how it works? It's his claim. You know what? I have to take a break. We'll start this one from the top. It's too important. This goes to the issue of birthright citizenship. I'm glad you're here. You're in exactly the right place, the only place that's going to break this down for you. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Folks, the first 100-plus days of the Trump presidency has been astonishing, and the Heritage Foundation has been keeping track. Americans were sick and tired of the status quo in Washington, D.C., and that had led to a border crisis and an erosion of family life in America. They sent President Trump back to Washington with a mandate to restore American greatness. And the good news is that America's back. Now, if you want to see exactly how he did it, go to heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. to get your free list of Trump's 100 wins in 100 days. The Heritage Foundation has been counting wins in the first 100 days since President Trump's new administration took office. And I'm sure you can name many of those wins, from taking steps to secure our border to cutting government waste. But the Heritage Foundation has a comprehensive list of the top 100 wins so far. So go to heritage.org/Levin and get your list. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. It's very important you stick with me after the top of the hour, because I'm going to pull it all together from a constitutional perspective and how this affects your liberty. It's a big deal because these federal district judges, with the support of some of these Supreme Court justices now, have every intention of overturning the last election. And, of course, that never comes into the questioning, does it? Does it? So it's very, very important. Stick with me, because the first hour sets the stage. The second hour puts the exclamation mark where it needs to be. Cut 12, go.
There's a discrete identified group on one issue. Does citizenship mean are you born in the territory of the United States, or does it mean are you loyal to someone else?
Let me tell you what's going on here, because this is a fan dance of a legal fiction, a constitutional fiction. It doesn't mean if you're born in the United States. Diplomats have children in the United States. They're not American citizens. Tourists have children in the United States. They're not American citizens. At no time in 1866 or 1868, when the 14th Amendment was drafted, was there any discussion of people who were born in the United States becoming American citizens except for the children of former slaves? The 14th Amendment was about slavery. It was about the end of slavery. It was about nothing else. It applied the Fifth Amendment, due process and equal protection, all throughout the country in every state. The Fifth Amendment only applied to the federal government. The 14th Amendment applied the Fifth Amendment to every state. Equal protection and due process. For newly free blacks, equal protection and due process. For their children, citizenship for their children. It had nothing to do with foreigners stepping into the country, having children, and thereby getting citizenship. Nowhere is that said. Is that written? Nowhere. So the issue is, are we going to live a fiction for the rest of time and pretend that's what it is, or not? Or not? These justices, as much as I can't stand some of them, they know the history of this. They know how to read. The question is whether they're going to once again turn themselves into pretzels in order to rule. And here's what they're going to say. And I believe they'll have a majority, unfortunately, because most of them don't have any guts. They're going to say, look, you can interpret it either way you wish. But the fact is that has been the practice. That's how it's been instituted by the executive branch. And who are we? Who are we to change the practices of the executive branch over all these decades and to put upon all these children who eventually will be born here a very ominous and onerous decision? That's where they're going to go. I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Welcome back, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Now, you heard what went on in the Supreme Court. Broke it down as best we could. There was more of it, but that's good enough. And What was really being discussed in that courtroom? Birthright citizenship? National injunctions? What was really being discussed in that courtroom? Power. Who had the power to make what decisions? Who had the power to make what decisions? And this is what I'm hoping. It's sort of a revolutionary idea, but it's revolutionary because it's crucial. To get into the bloodstream of America, bloodstream of talk radio, bloodstream of Fox, and bloodstream here, you and me. The understanding that we talk around this issue all the time, but we need to confront it, challenge it, embrace it, or oppose it. This is very, very important to understand. I mean, this is really groundbreaking stuff. And as I pointed out the other evening, many have written about and debated the issue of power. The ancients and modern philosophers, scholars, statesmen. Because power determines your social arrangements, quality of life, and more to the point of this book, whether you're free or enslaved or some degree of either. It determines your personal fate, the fate of your community, the fate of a nation. There are infinite ways to view power, innumerable contexts, circumstances in which to apply it. There's truly no simple, concise, all-purpose definition for what is meant by power. But it's more than a mere word. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's a term meant to describe some kind of force or energy that surrounds us all the time. It's ubiquitous in your life, in the life of an entire society, and in a country. Power is a core reality and characteristic of human existence. Yet without more to go on, such as context and circumstance, it can be ambiguous and elusive. Let me ask you a question today as you went to work or you were working from home or whatever you do. Were you thinking about power at all? No. Even if somebody gets in your face and is rude to you or somebody is kind to you, what were you thinking about? Well, they were rude or they're kind. It all involves power. In all human pursuits, personal pursuits, life events, it matters. It shapes economies and politics and governments. Comes in many forms, many variations. But that it exists and it matters. Power is inextricably linked to liberty. Liberty is inextricably linked to rights. Liberty, the earthly understanding of liberty, involves power. Rights involve power. We don't get our rights from man, but man here on earth determines whether we get to exercise those rights. Very important. Power determines if there's too much liberty, anarchy, too little liberty, tyranny. Power determines who gets to make these decisions. Under our constitutional construct, we have three branches. That's the battle going on right now. Power is a gift, and power is a threat. That's the truth. History is replete with examples of tyrants grabbing power in the name of liberty. History is replete with examples of republics that have collapsed, that existed much longer than we have so far, because they were turned from republics into empires, empires into failed societies. Athens, Rome, numerous lesser societies. Democracies struggle against the centralization of power almost from the moment they're established, as we have. Power determines whether you live in a republic, a democracy, whether you live in a judicial oligarchy, a monarchy. Power makes all those determinations. Language has power. The way language is used, if you have the freedom to speak, the freedom to think. This is very, very important. People use power in good ways and in devious ways. Power can be said to be one thing when it's actually another thing, just like liberty, just like democracy. The most genocidal regimes use the word democracy, talk about freedom, but they don't believe in either. They don't believe in either. Over the millennia, mankind has generally suffered more from the abuse of power and the concomitant diminution of liberty than from its humane and righteous application. That's one of my hypotheses in this book. There are important exceptions, of course, in the individual's everyday life and society generally. But narrowing the focus even further, in the long history of mankind and even in modern times, the most pervasive form of governance under which most human beings live and have lived is authoritarian. Today, one only needs to look at the membership of the United Nations to prove the point. Some 70% of the world's population currently lives under brutal autocratic regimes, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, like the UAE, like Iran, all of our new friends. Now, this raises an unpleasant question. Is this the natural state of mankind? At least in the communal sense, even if individuals themselves wish for and seek liberty? And so, in analyzing this issue of power, in bringing you into this discussion as you read through this book, I try to break it down into simple steps. I call this negative power. Negative power. What's negative power? Chapter 2. Negative power is power that is exercised by force or other less obvious coercive means. Among its purposes is to limit individual identity, sovereignty, and liberty. In its most aggressive form, and when exercised by a faction, cabal, or government, both autocratic and authoritarian, for example, communist regimes, fascist regimes, terrorist quasi-states, the people are treated as servants to the proclaimed cause, and those exercising power, rather than the other way around, exercise it against the people. Its purpose is to devour and control society, not serve it. It must denude individuals of their free will, self-worth, aspirations, development, progress, human spirit, control the society generally through the exercise of concentrated, centralized, unchallenged, and ubiquitous power. It's critical to restrict speech and debate, manipulate language, manufacture new meanings for existing words. And by the way, as I explain deeper into the book, this isn't only about fascistic or communist or terrorist regimes. This happens in democracies. And it's happening in our republic. And what you heard, to bring it back to hour one, in the Supreme Court today, in the clips that we played by some of these justices, was not about democracy or republicanism. So I coined another phrase. It's about authoritarian democracy. Well, Mark, how can you have both? Very easy. Democracies don't ensure liberty. They don't ensure that your unalienable rights will be honored. I call this authoritarian democracy. The use of negative power, concentrated power, violation of separation of power, to create a Potemkin-like fiction, to disguise the true intentions of the abusers, and worse, they're transformed into tools in support of the exercise of what I call soft negative power. Not full-out negative power, like Marxists and so forth, but a soft negative power. An authoritarian democracy. What's an authoritarian democracy? Does this interest you, Mr. Producer, as I go through this? Authoritarian democracy is when a democracy begins to slide into a form of authoritarianism. Not all at once, but steadily. With authoritarian attributes slowly proliferate. Steadily. where authoritarian attributes slowly proliferate, and one branch of the democracy begins to envelop the others, and where all branches coalesce into a whole. Our problem, of course, the judiciary. Either way, the exercise of power is increasingly centralized, like unelected judges. The citizenry increasingly peripheral. Typically results in rule by the unelected governmental branches. That is, the judiciary and the administrative state. But can also mutate into excessive executive or legislative power. Authoritarian democracies adopt and use the tactics of authoritarian regimes, albeit at first with more of a glove than an iron fist. But the underlying attributes are there. For example, legislatures that pass tyrannical laws, but which laws are said to be legitimate simply because the legislature adopted them. Courts that disregard due process for citizens, but which trials are said to do justice because they were held in a court of law with defense counsel and jury's presence. The use of law is said to be a legitimate application of power because it is the law, not because it is proper, just, or moral law. You heard that this evening when I played the clip of Justice Barrett. You're telling me you won't honor a decision in the Second Circuit? There you have the use of the law is said to be a legitimate application of power because it's the law, not because it's the proper, just, or moral decision. Even today, the impact of authoritarian democracy has seeped into our society's psyche so successfully that the late Austrian-American economist Ludwig von Mises observed that one of the worst tyrannies of all, Marxism, has become part of the West psyche. And I go on. Power. In that courtroom today. The power in that courtroom today. The Fowers did not believe that the Supreme Court as it is today should have the power that it's exercising. It certainly didn't know that lower courts, which it didn't create, it left to Congress to create, they're not a function of the Constitution directly, they're a function of the Constitution's power granted to Congress. There is no way that the framers of the Constitution and the ratifiers in the state created the courts that we have today. Period. Period. No debate. Period. They have to make insane, absurd, illogical arguments like you heard Jackson make when it comes to national injunctions. When you heard Barrett. You're not going to honor a decision in that circuit in that state? Are you kidding me? Well, what's the decision? It doesn't matter. See what I mean? Doesn't matter if it's just, if it's right, if it's moral. Doesn't matter. So you could have a circuit court do the equivalent of a Dred Scott decision, and of course, Barrett's point is you have to follow the order. That's tyranny. You can always appeal it to us here on the Supreme Court. Doesn't change a thing. The power being exercised by these courts was actually considered. The judiciary generally, without getting into district courts, should they have a policy role? Should there be a council? A coalesced council with the presidency. It's proposed, I've told you that before, and utterly rejected. Rejected, out of hand. What's going on now is worse. It's not a council that serves with the president, has veto power. It's beyond a council. It has veto power, period. Every single federal district judge, almost 700 of them, could overturn the result of the election. That's power. Negative power is what I call it. Negative power. There's positive power. Positive power is the pushback. Those people who believe in constitutionalism, separation of powers, the proper lane for the different branches. Your Constitution was set up as positive power, linked directly to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. Positive power, what does it mean? It means power as best as can be accumulated and directed in the governmental context for the people. That's based on the Declaration. That's based on Judeo-Christian belief systems. That's based on God is the sovereign. God's children is the sovereign. Not government, not the ruling class. I know, we're biting off a lot, but I'm really into it. I'm really into it. And the reason why this book is so important in my view, I could take every issue that's going on today in the Middle East, on the border, and apply it to this book, and the explanation in this book to power and its consequence for you, whether you live in liberty or not, whether you live in a secure society or not. This issue, which is so overlooked, is sort of a drive-by issue where liberty and rights take up all the space in the room, and they're absolutely crucial. I know, I've written about it. We've talked about it for 25 years. But we must zone in and focus in on what makes liberty possible, on what makes rights possible here on earth. And that's power. You can get On Power, my book, at Amazon.com right now. You can pre-order it. I encourage you to do it. So when they start slamming away with these deep discounts, you will get them. It's important. On Power. It's going to be like no book you've ever read. This I promise you. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans. By the way, we have 2 great shows this week on Life, Liberty, and Levin. And Saturday, I'll talk about that one first. We have Mark Thiessen. Mark Thiessen and I, we've never met, we've never spoken to each other. I think he's fantastic. And our buddy Gordon Chang to talk about the tariff deal with Communist China. I think you'll be surprised at some of the things he said, and a little bit of my pushback. But most of all, I think you'll find my opening statement, my monologue, very, very interesting. I think the president will find it very, very interesting. I don't know. I think the media will try and hang on my every syllable, as they always do, to try and create, controversy, Mr. Producer. But don't worry. It's important. That show is important. Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Set your DVR. Don't forget to watch it. I know you're going to want to see these shows. I really do. Trust me on this. I'll be right back. Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans.
Mark Levin, the Great One.
The Great One, Mark Levin.
Dial in now, 877-381-3811.
This so-called deal that the president seems to be more than hinting at, the main question comes down to whether Iran will be able to continue to spin the nuclear core centrifuges at whatever level. We've had experts on my various programs. We've had General Jack Keane. You can read articles for yourself by people who understand this business, who are of no political persuasion, and they're just laying it out. Iran has reached the point where it can go from lowering the content, the nuclear content, if you will, uranium, of its fissile material to levels that are considered for civilian domestic use. But having reached that point where they're able to actually purify it to over 60%, that means in less than 2 weeks, as General Keane pointed out, and many others have, they can get the level of that uranium to nuclear bomb-grade uranium. So what the Iranians did with Obama and have been trying to do with Trump is to say, look, we'll have it at a lower level. And apparently, according to an NBC report, they're even saying, okay, you can take out our material, destroy it, you can have inspectors, you can do this, you can do that, but we will not give up the spinning of these centrifuges. Because, of course, we need it for energy. If you don't destroy the centrifuges, then they still have a nuclear bomb program. Despite anything else and everything else, they still have a nuclear bomb program. Maybe they'll behave under Trump, but they sure as hell won't behave forever. 52 out of the 53 Republican senators, you've never seen this before, 52 out of the 53, some of them libertarian, some of them pure MAGA, some of them constitutional conservatives, or a mix of the above, they wrote the president yesterday. And they said in part, 52 of them, we write to express our strong support for your efforts to secure a deal with Iran that dismantles its nuclear program and to reinforce the explicit warnings that you and officials in your administration have issued that the regime must permanently give up the capacity for enrichment. That's what they mean, those spinning centrifuges. During your first term, you withdrew the United States from the deeply broken Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that's the Obama deal, and imposed maximum pressure on the regime. As you said then, a fatal flaw of the deal was, you ready for this? That it, quote, allowed Iran to continue enriching uranium and over time reach the brink of a nuclear breakout, quote, unquote. Those were the president's words. Goes on later, the scope and breadth of Iran's nuclear buildout have made it impossible to verify any new deal that allows Iran to continue enriching uranium. In its most recent report published in February 26, the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that because of Iran's activities over the last 4 years, quote, the agency has lost continuity of knowledge in relation to the production and current inventory of centrifuges. It's the heart of the system. Rotors and bellows, heavy water, and UOC. What they're saying is all the elements for building a nuclear bomb, we've lost all insight into their inventory. And the senators say it will not be possible to restore. They said you and your administration or the president have therefore correctly drawn a red line against any deal that allows Iran to retain any enrichment capacity. So I want you to remember this. If we're waving around a piece of paper that says they can enrich with their centrifuges, but it has to be for domestic use, then we've lost. I'm sorry, the truth may hurt, but the truth will set you free and keep you secure. Your national security presidential memorandum, the senators wrote, on Iran states that, quote, Iran's nuclear program, including its enrichment and reprocessing related to capabilities of nuclear-capable missiles, poses an existential danger to the United States and the entire civilized world. You recently said that only full dismantlement of those capabilities would be acceptable. Special Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff has made it clear, in that context of negotiation, that for any final arrangement to work, quote, Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program. My fears will get down to semantics. Well, it's not for nuclear weapons purposes, it's for nuclear energy purposes. That's where you got to throw the flag, ladies and gentlemen. Pay very close attention to this. Very close. I'm putting the marker out. I'm giving you a heads up. I'm worried this is where we're going. People in the administration know that the senators objecting to it, 80% of the Republicans in the House signed a similar letter. I've made it abundantly clear. You've made it abundantly clear. No nukes means no nukes and no capacity to have nukes. The senators close. We cannot afford another agreement that enables Iran to play for time, as the Obama deal did. The Iranian regime should know that the administration has congressional backing to ensure its ability to enrich uranium is permanently eliminated. So let me be crystal clear. I have supported the president's position from day one. I supported it in the first term. I supported it when he ran for president. I supported it when he texted me and said, I will protect Israel. I support it now. If there's a change, it's a change in the administration. It's a change in their negotiations. It's not a change with these 52 senators, 80% of the House Republicans, with me or you. The change will be them. Who signed the letter? Warmongers and neocons? And don't fall for that crap from the mentally challenged. Peter Ricketts, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, John Thune, James Reich, John Passero, Roger Wicker, Mike Crapo, Tim Scott, Steve Daines, John Curtis, John Cornyn, Kevin Kramer, Charles Grassley, David McCormick, James Lankford, Susan Collins, Mark Wayne Mullen, Cynthia Loomis, the people who signed this letter, Tim Sheehy, Rick Scott, John Hoban, John Bozeman, John Husted, Tom Tillis, Shelley Moore Caputo, Cindy Hyde Smith, Ted Budd, Eric Schmidt, Dan Sullivan, Jerry Moran, Jim Banks, Mike Lee. Salute you on this one, Mike. Katie Boyd Britt, Ashley Moody, Marsha Blackburn, Mitch McConnell, Joni Ernst, Deb Fisher, John Kennedy, Bill Cassidy, Todd Young, Michael Rounds, Bill Haggerty, Tommy Tuberville, Bernie Moreno, Josh Hawley, Ron Johnson, Lindsey Graham, James Justice, Roger Marshall, Lisa Murkowski, all but Rand Paul, because we know what he is and where he stands. That is the complete rainbow coalition of Republicans. Every single one of them, 52 out of 53, signed this letter. And if they said it once in this letter, they said it 5, 6 times. No enrichment capacity. Period. They didn't distinguish between domestic use, because they know it's a farce, or nuclear missiles, because it's a difference without a distinction in a matter of weeks. But don't worry, we will dismantle what they've already produced. But don't worry, we will have inspectors. But don't worry. But the Iranians want to keep the spinning centrifuges. You need to ask yourself why. Why are they willing, according to this NBC News piece, why are they willing to do everything but that? It's the but that. That's the core of everything. So I want to give you a heads up so you can think about that, depending on what comes. Now, look, most people aren't sitting there saying spinning centrifuges, you can move it from domestic use to nuclear use. So if somebody says we have peace in our time, the greatest agreement of all agreements, the greatest deal of all deals, we have inspectors. The United States can go in and take out their existing material. We've got this. We've got that. Your question should be, what about the spinning centrifuges? Why are they buried 350 feet underground in steel and cement enclosed bunkers? Do you know any utility in the United States that does that, or any place in the world? Your question should be, despite all of it, do they still have their centrifuges? Do they still have their centrifuges? The Republicans in the Senate and the House get it. Jack Keane gets it. The experts get it. I get it. We all get it. This was the grave problem with the Obama deal, as President Trump himself pointed out. President Trump himself pointed out. This was the problem with the Obama deal. You left them the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. It doesn't matter what fissile material they have today. It doesn't matter what inspections you do today. They still have spinning centrifuges. And maybe they'll wait out the Trump administration and wait for the next one. Maybe they hope for a Biden-like figure or something like that. I have no idea. But they play the long game. We don't play the long game. They play the long game. The communist Chinese play even a longer game. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans. I see our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, told the Israelis that they need to do more to provide for the Gazans. And yet I didn't read that our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said a damn thing to the Qataris who funded October 7th, funded this war, which has resulted in what the Israelis have had to do to defend themselves. I didn't hear anything about that. Why? You know, Steve Bannon's a tough guy. Steve Bannon should never have been in prison. Remember, we talked about that at some length. What was done to him was disgusting. I've known him for a long time. We don't really keep in touch. Now, I wouldn't say different views of the world. Maybe we come at things differently, but often we overlap. But I'll tell you what I like about Bannon. He speaks his mind come hell or high water. He's a smart guy. I can disagree with people and respect them. There's some people I disagree with and I have nothing but contempt for them. Bannon I respect. He's a good man in many ways. He was on the Winston Marshall show, and I want you to hear this. His take on Qatar, because it's exactly my take on Qatar. Cut 5, go.
Qatar is the railhead of the problem, okay, because of their money. They fund the Muslim Brotherhood. They're in league with Turkey, which I think is a big problem right now. They are, I think, helping to finance Turkey's expansion of the, Erdogan is a dangerous guy. And look, the president, I understand that people in the White House totally disagree with this. That's fine. They have their opinion, and President Trump's acting on it. I think do it very smartly. I just keep warning that Qatar did not sign the stop financing terror, Muslim Brotherhood and other terrorists.
Harboring Hamas.
Not just harboring Hamas and underwriting Hamas.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the whole coordination, that Hamas attack, which leads to a whole nother thing that, another unpleasant topic. Which is, how did that take place over 7 or 8 months or a year with Egyptian intelligence, Saudi intelligence, British MI6, which is, by the way, British MI6 is dialed in the Middle East like nobody's business. The CIA, nobody knew about it. Also in Qatar, I'm not just pointing any fingers at Americans. Tony Blair and I think Tony Blair and there's a whole host of people in the United Kingdom are taking Qatar money also, I believe.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
and it's disgraceful. We should have nothing to do with them.
Well, you and I are in agreement on that. There are people I respect that come to a different set of, you have facts and they come with a different set of things. And I would just tell people, Qatar, there was just a report the other day in the great universities in our country, and I'm sure it's going on in England. The Chinese, I think it's over the last couple of years, the Chinese Communist Party in Qatar put $29 billion invested in the top universities in the United States of America. It's outrageous. I want all that money out. I want all the Saudi money out. I want all the UAE money out. I'm a big proponent that right now, where the world's condition is we have enough pension fund money here, we have enough capital here, that we got to be very careful about having foreign money in the situation, particularly as we're in this tough negotiations in Persia.
Man, is he right on? Honestly, I couldn't say better than he did. 100%. It's very painful for me to watch many of my colleagues who are sycophantic on this stuff. Now, they know Qatar's a terrorist regime. They know Qatar paid for October 7th. They know Qatar subsidized Hamas and wants the extinction of the Jews in Israel. They know Qatar is in alliance with Iran. They know Qatar wants Iran to build a nuclear weapon. They know that Qatar has destroyed our Ivy League schools. They know Qatar has funded the front groups in our country that support Hamas and other terrorist organizations and seek to overthrow the United States of America. They know that Qatar, the leaders are inbred Islamists who believe that the West must be destroyed. Of course they'll make multi-billion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar deals. Of course they want our military base to protect them. Well, they plot and attack us here on the homeland. You need to be wide-eyed when you're dealing with terrorist Islamist regimes. And so the president knows, everybody in the world knows, when it comes to Qatar, I strongly disagree with what we're doing here. And no, media-ite and others, it doesn't mean that I want to see Donald Trump fail or anything of the sort. No, I want to see him succeed. He's my president, my candidate. You have differences with your wife and your husband, don't you? You have differences with family members. It doesn't mean you want to destroy them or usurp them. So I go from being a sycophant to a usurper, because that's how the media operates. That's not how I operate. It's certainly not how Donald Trump operates. He knows exactly what I think. But Qatar is what it is. The evidence is overwhelming. The Free Press has a massive article on it today. Fantastic. We have organizations linked to the research and analysis of terrorist and extremist organizations that have no political position, one after another, associated with George Washington University, associated with another organization, on and on and on. It's all laid out. Qatar's the enemy. They hate us. They want to destroy us. I don't care if they smile. I'll be back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Hour 3, the bottom of the hour. We'll take some calls if you want to get in the queue now. It gets pretty booked up pretty fast. Jamie Dimon is the CEO of Chase. People quote him all the time. Honest to God, I don't know why. Doesn't seem particularly sharp to me, but apparently to other people, he does. For many years, I thought he was a Democrat. Now I'm not sure what he is. Not that it matters. But I'm going to use him as a foil. Nothing against him. I don't know him. As I said, he's the CEO of Chase. He was on Bloomberg today. First of all, the question is weird, but the answer is my focus. Cut 14, go.
Do you worry about U.S. supremacy, actually? Exceptionalism?
Yeah, I never believe we're quite that exceptional. I mean, remember, America's an unbelievable country with freedoms and the gifts of God and water, food, energy, and then the gifts of the founding fathers called freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of enterprise. Those dwarf everything. And so we still have the most prosperous economy the world's ever seen, but the Americans shouldn't take it as a divine right to sex either. We've slowed ourselves down with regulation, stupid bureaucracy. We haven't done budgets in years, so no, we shouldn't assume it's forever. I don't think we'll still be preeminent, militarily and economically for a long time, but if we don't do everything right, we could lose that too, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I think very important to that is America, the goal of America should be to help the military alliances of the Western world and to help the economic alliance of the Western world to walk side by side like you did in Victory in Europe Day the other day here, to strengthen the Western world and hold it together, not to cause it to fragment. And so I think we have to work hard to make sure that's the case.
You know what? That is a brilliant response, Mr. Producer. Brilliant. I agree with 98% of it. I really do. It is a brilliant response. And notice what he says. The West has to stick together. These Western alliances, military and economic. And he's right. And I want to get to that in a moment as well. Where he made a mistake, I think, and I don't think it was purposeful, was exceptional. When we say America is exceptional, we're not talking about the government. We're not talking about the bureaucracy. We're talking about what John Locke meant, what Alexis de Tocqueville meant, among others. America is exceptional. The government that the Constitution created was exceptional. In practice today, it's not. A massive European-style bureaucracy. Regulations of the socialist kind in Europe. I know what he's talking about. I just want to articulate it a little better, the distinction. But otherwise, I think his response was right on. And his point, the goal of America should be to help the military alliances of the Western world and to help economic alliances of the Western world to walk side by side like you did in Victory, Europe Day, Vichy. The other day here, to strengthen the Western world and hold it together, not to cause it to fragment. And so I think we have to work hard to make sure that's the case. I agree with that 100%. I had Zuhdi Jasser on this program last night. I have a whole section in the book on power, how the Western world, with the Judeo-Christian foundations, has a completely different mindset than Qatar, than Iran, than Saudi Arabia, than Hamas, than the Muslim Brotherhood, than Islamic Jihad. Totally different. Totally different. I don't care how many jets they have. I don't care how many palaces they've built. I don't care how many malls they have, how many cars they have, exploiting Western materialism and so forth and so on. The ideology has not changed. Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11. Qatar was behind October 7th, and Qatar gave KSM, the man who led the attack on 9/11, made it possible for him to lead the attack on 9/11 by giving him a fake passport and a heads up that the FBI was about to pick him up. Qatar did that. Qatar did that. Of course we have a military base there, and they're happy to fix it. Of course they'll make economic deals with us. Of course they will. They want to get rich off of us. They want our military equipment. They want our military protection. As they fund the enemy within, being them, the destruction of our country. We're going to give them military protection, our technological know-how. They'll give us enormous sums of money, in exchange for which they'll receive enormous sums of money. Well, they're destroying our... I don't... This is where there's a little bit of a disconnect for me. We are rounding up people, trying to deport them. If they're promoting Hamas, Qatar funded Hamas. If they're promoting anti-Semitism, Qatar wants to wipe out the Jews. If they're funding anti-Americanism, they'll make deals with corporate leaders and political leaders, but they seek to destroy our country. I would say Qatar is the most cunning and devious of all of our enemies. We actually get debates about, is Qatar good? Is Qatar bad? You actually go on my own social media platforms, we have people defending Qatar. People defending Qatar. I actually think Chatsworth Osborne Jr. was talking about how great Qatar was, wasn't he, Mr. Producer? Chatsworth. America first. No, he's Qatar first. There's no defense of Qatar. This is where I have a disagreement. Look, it's not personal. It's not intended to usurp. But I have an obligation to my audience. I have an obligation to you to convey to you what I know. I have to be myself. I have to deal with facts. I never was a pom-pom guy. I don't have any pom-poms. But all this praise of Qatar is pretty sick when you think about it. And I can tell you the 9/11 families aren't all that thrilled with all this praise of Saudi Arabia. They've sued Saudi Arabia. They've tried to. I'll bet all those firefighter families and all those police families, they're not pretty happy watching all these smiles and so forth with Saudi Arabia. And then, of course, the insult of insults. Our Secretary of State, Rubio, tells Israel, you got to do a better job on humanitarian aid in Gaza. Qatar funded the attack on Israel, the slaughter of their people. And now Israel has to deal with the results and is told, after all the pomp and circumstance in Qatar, that little Israel, you got to do a better job in Gaza. Israel doesn't have hundreds of billions of dollars to give to anybody. Israel doesn't have the oil fields. Israel doesn't have any of it. A relationship with Israel is not based on oil. It's not based on finances. It's based on a mutual belief system. As Jamie Dimon was just saying here, the West. If the West doesn't protect the West will cease to exist. Look at immigration in the West. Look at immigration in Europe. There's one Islamist terrorist. He wrote about it, made it clear. And he talked about conquering the West through immigration. I kid you not. And he's not the only one. A new Muslim crusade. Think I'm making this stuff up? Well, look what's happened to Britain, specifically London. Look what's happened to France, specifically Paris. Look what's happened to these smaller European countries. They're a disaster. Disaster. Look what's happened to our colleges and universities. They're a disaster. The greatest college and university system on the face of the earth literally has been destroyed. And I don't know if we can get it back. I really don't. I really don't. This guy, Jamie Dimon, I said, I don't know this guy. I'm well aware of him. The things he said were correct. They were accurate. Sure as hell doesn't sound like a Democrat. If he's a Democrat, he's one of those fossil moderate Democrats. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let me ask you a question, America. Did we bomb the Houthis? Did we bomb the Houthis, Mr. Producer? Did we bomb them for like a month and a half? Didn't we bomb the hell out of them? Isn't that what the President and the Secretary of Defense said? We bombed them and bombed them into submission. Isn't that correct, Rich? Didn't we bomb the wrong country? I mean, again, it's a little paradoxical. So it's not that we don't bomb. So the isolationists should have been very upset that we were bombing in Yemen the Houthis. But for bombing the Houthis in Yemen, then why are we so reticent about taking out the nuclear sites in Iran? And in fact, I'm just wondering now, why didn't we do that first? This is something I'll explore in the days and weeks ahead as other people regurgitate as I sit here and think through these things. We did bomb, and we bombed a lot. There were bombs dropping everywhere. Everywhere. Every night. And we did so. And we were right to do so. Where were the isolationists? What is this kind of immunity for Iran? I really don't get it. I don't get it. So we were already warmongers, were we not, Mr. Producer? We were already neocons. We were warmongers and neocons and interventionists who hit the Houthis. Why did we hit the Houthis? Well, they were blocking our ships. They were attacking our ships. Okay. The mothership for the Houthis is what? Iran. They couldn't have done any of it without Iran. And Iran wants a nuclear weapon. So Iran, effectively, through its surrogate, was hitting our ships, blocking the waterways. Iran wants a nuclear weapon. And we bombed Yemen. Bombs were dropping everywhere. I didn't hear from the fifth column isolationists. The warmongers. I didn't hear from the warmongers. And the neocons. And the interventionists. You know, I could have a field day with this if I really wanted to, but I'll leave it right there. And all the little leftists and the pseudo-conservatives over at Mediaite and the... look, we got a headline here. Dan Abrams. Oh, look at all the clicks. Look at all the hits we can get. Look at this. Oh, my God. Listen to this. You guys are you're scabs. That's all you are. You're scabs. And you pick at your scab. That's all you are. You don't actually do any news. I'm talking to millions and millions of people. You're right. Oh, right. But give it a headline. Nobody cares. I use you as a foil. I enjoy attacking you because you're clowns. And they proudly tell them, you know what I do, Mom? What? Nothing. But think about what I'm telling you, America. First with Qatar, and then the bombing. What's with Iran? Why is Chatsworth so worried about Iran? Why is Chatsworth praising Qatar? Why weren't they condemning? Maybe he was. I don't listen. The bombing of Yemen. Bombs were dropping everywhere, as I understand it. After the break, we'll take some phone calls, of course, because we've tried to take more calls than we normally have in the past, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it the last several months. Mr. Producer, John Fetterman on Capitol Hill today. Cut 15, go.
What's your message to your constituents who read the New York magazine?
First of all, the guy asked the question, and I swear he was slurring his speech. Was he, Mr. Producer? Run that again, would you please?
What's your message to your constituents who...
Right there. Right there. So they want to take out John Fetterman. It's sickening. This guy had a stroke. Really, he shouldn't have been elected to the Senate. He's recovered. I don't know if he's recovered fully, but he's made a remarkable recovery. He's cogent. He takes serious positions, substantive positions, but he's a moderate. So now we have to destroy him, you see. That's how it goes. Just like that senator from Arizona. I forget what her name was. They had to destroy her. Sinema, I think her name was. Kristen Sinema. So they had to destroy her. Go ahead.
a New York Magazine piece and have concerns about your health and getting in the way of your job as a senator?
Yeah, well, for me, it's like, it's like in the Goodfellas, everyone takes a beating sometime. It was just a dumb hit piece, and we've all moved on.
What's the, you think the motivation, though, of them, like Jenelson, your former chief of staff?
A bizarre grudge, but that's where we are. And like I said, we've all moved on.
Now, he sounds perfectly cogent, thoughtful there. They're trying to destroy John Fetterman. That's what they're trying to do. They don't do it with Bernie Sanders, AOC. They don't do it with Schumer. No. Fetterman has to go, you see. I'll be right back.
Mark the 10. The thunder on the right. Call in now. 877-381-3811.
Hello. Hello out there. Mr. Producer has sent me the updated call list. Let's take some calls. We're going to dive into the gene pool here. Ravi, San Diego, California, the great KLSD. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mark?
Very well. Thank you, sir.
I want to thank you very much for taking my call and also for your important focus on the Iran issue, specifically the Iran nuclear negotiations. And
thank you.
So I was calling specifically in light of supposedly based on
Let me just say something on that. With Mr. and Mrs. America, the vast majority of us want nothing to do with Iran. We do not want them getting a nuclear warhead. We do not want them having intercontinental missiles, and we want it stopped. Inside Washington, there's a little cabal with a couple of very radical, weirdo think tanks. And their view is that if the vast majority of the American people, red-blooded patriots, don't want Iran having a nuclear weapon, and if we're forced to do to Iran what we did to the Houthis in Yemen, then we are warmongers, interventionists, and neocons. These people are perfectly fine with Iran having a nuclear weapon. Whatever deal is reached by any administration will be a great deal. That's how they think. What do you think about that?
So actually, when you think about it, the biggest warmongers in reality are the isolationists. Because if you look back, for example, at World War II, the United States didn't enter World War II for over 2 years until we were attacked in December of 1941, and America was very isolationist back then, and the result was a far more destructive war than would have happened had the United States, intervened in the 1930s.
You're 100% right. But these are ideologues. In fact, they're perverse. Let me go one step further. They call Qatar our friend, while Qatar is spending billions of dollars destroying our universities, pushing the Marxist Islamo-Nazi fusion, the hate America crowd, the burn American flag crowd, the pro-Hamas. They're not anti-Israel. They're pro-Hamas. They're pro-terrorists. What do you think about Chatsworth, who says they're our good friend? Are they our good friend? Is Qatar our good friend?
Qatar is as good of a friend as Iran is. They both want to undermine the United States. They've proven it, and again, they consistently fund terrorism to an extreme degree. They are a state sponsor of terrorism, but because they are able to, be in the good graces of a lot of people, they are treated differently than Iran, among other reasons. But they're very.
Let me ask you a question. When the president rightly bombed the Houthis because they were attacking our ships, the Houthis are funded and would not exist but for Iran. When the president bombed the Houthis, let's use the fifth column isolationist propaganda, which I reject, but let's play along. Was that the act of a warmonger, a neocon, or an interventionist, or was that the act of a patriotic commander-in-chief?
A patriotic commander-in-chief who wanted to simply guarantee freedom of passage for United States vessels. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you, buddy. Great call. I appreciate it. I can't wait till I get my books so I can give them out, but that's going to take like 6 weeks. Instead, you need to pre-order your copy. Jump in. Jump in. Get the best price you can. I'm telling you how it works. They don't want you to know, Amazon, but I know. Let's go to Mike, Maynard, Iowa, the great KXEL powerhouse. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing fine, Mark. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
You were talking about Iran enriching uranium, and that would open up a whole ball of wax. At what percentage are they enriching it? Is it just for producing electricity? Is it for nuclear warheads? You have to have the IAEA coming in there every week, scouring the sands. Well, maybe the free world that does produce uranium for electricity, maybe we could produce it for them and sell it to them at a reduced...
Boy, oh boy, that would, I guess, trump them, wouldn't it? That would expose them for the liars they are, wouldn't it?
Well, we would box them in, logically, during the fifth round of negotiations, because...
This is brilliant. You're saying, okay, we have a better idea. We and the Europeans and others, perhaps more geographically close to Iran, we will sell you energy produced by our nuclear domestic energy programs. Boy, oh boy, that's a brilliant idea. And that would demonstrate that they're full of crap. And so is everybody who pretends that that's what they want to do. Boy, if I had a book, I'd give it to you, Mike. I'll tell you that right now. That's a great call. That's Mike, Maynard, Iowa, KXEL. I hope Washington's listening. I hope the isolationist, pacifist, fifth column's listening. The vast majority of Americans want nothing to do with this. They do not want Iran getting a nuke. And, as I've discussed, and I'm the first to make the point, bombs were dropping all over Yemen. I think it was the wrong country. That's just my take on it. You know, being a warmonger and all. All right, Mike, thank you. Great call, brother. Great call. Let's go to Joel, Naples, Florida. Everybody wants to talk about this now. WFSX. Great station there. Joel, how are you, brother?
Hi, Mark. I'm doing great, and thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to ask this. We had, back in 1978, 79, 454 days, we had Marines getting killed in Lebanon and barracks, and then the continual deaths of innocent people in Israel and everywhere around the world. How can
our two embassies, we had the Marines murdered. We had the Iranians took our embassy personnel and held them forever, but they were scared to hell out of Reagan. So Reagan comes in and they released them right away. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, it's like grabbing a rattlesnake and kissing it on top of the head. I mean, how do you expect? How does anybody expect to trust them? But I like that at least President Trump opened the door to say, hey, you know, we're gonna ask if you want to come and negotiate, and if you don't, we're gonna, level you.
And I'm not opposed to that. And they need to make sure, as the president said, as the Senate and House Republican letter said to the president on Wednesday, no centrifuges. That's all. You want domestic energy, nuclear energy? A lot of countries haven't. They don't have spinning centrifuges. But I just want to remind you, their mindset is quite different than ours. They play the long game. They can make a deal with this administration and wait it out, and then the next administration has to deal with it. The other thing is you have a pattern here. They lie. Doesn't that mean anything? They lie. That's why we're at the 11th hour, because they lied. Right. They weren't supposed to be doing any of this anyway. They've been doing it. They've been burying it underground, so they lie. And they sign a deal. It's just something that's going to have to be explained. I think the president at some point is going to, I hope, speak to the nation. If there's some deal, explain why this deal's different and why the Iranians are different. And that those centrifuges aren't going to be spinning. I don't care at what level. If there's centrifuges and they're spinning, They have a nuclear program. It's that simple. Every expert I've talked to, military and scientific, has said the same thing. And you can go online and read real reports by real people who say the same thing. Joel, thank you for your call, my friend. Much appreciated. I shall return.
Mark Levin.
Roy, Fairfield, California, the great KSFO. Roy, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you. How are you doing today?
Let me look. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Two quick points. Number one, they just found a satellite photo of a Iranian nuclear facility they didn't know existed.
Yeah, it's secret. They hid it from even the IAEA in violation of the deal that they signed. But don't worry, any other future deal they sign, they're very earnest and sincere.
I firmly believe that. Point two, the centrifuges are extremely important here, not just the fact of dismantling them or destroying them, but the capacity to replicate them. There's only a couple of companies in the world, maybe 3 or 4, that have the capacity to build those things. And they're extremely, their technicalities are, most people can't.
By the way, you need to change the battery in your fire alarm there. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Anyway.
It's a pain in the ass to change those things, to be perfectly honest with you. You're making a good point. Go ahead.
I think part of the discussion would have to be with the people that build these things, and to absolutely.
Yeah, we need to do a better job. There's no question about it. This is the enemy. They want a nuclear weapon. They're going to have a breakout, if not during this administration. Perhaps it'll be delayed through this administration to the next administration. But I would bet everything on it. They will get a nuclear weapon unless they're blown out. That is, the program's blown out. People can attack me all they want. But in 5 years, they'll all be saying, like I said 3 years ago. Like I said 2 years ago. When they won't say crap right now. Go ahead, Roy. Finish up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And Mark, let me thank you for all that you do, your scholarship, your vision, your energy, and your attitude. Definitely, you're a national treasure.
You're very kind. Thank you. You know, there's some punk over at the American Conservative, which is basically a magazine for the illiterate, for the low IQ. Basically, it's nothing to do with conservatives or American. Matter of fact, they would have changed the name of that magazine. It's very misleading. But nonetheless, they're out there, and you got this guy Gates. This guy Gates. You know what? You know what I should do with this fool Gates, Matt Gates? I should get that report. Don't you think, if it's public, Mr. Producer? And I should start reading it line by line. What a sleazeball this guy is. Does he do his show with his pants on or pants off, Mr. Producer? Do we know? Because they only show the guy from the waist up. I don't know what goes over at OAN. Obviously, it's a ratings juggernaut. I don't have the foggiest idea. But there's Gates. He wanted to be governor. He's not going to be governor. Wanted to stay in the House. He's not going to stay in the House. But don't worry. He's learned to keep his pants on, and that's a good thing. Let's go to Tony, Clifton, New Jersey. If you're still there, Tony, how are you, sir?
Mark, I'm here, honey. How are you?
I'm very good.
It's been a long night. Your show is amazing. Here's my question. What's on my mind is 9/11, the Holocaust, October 7th. My question
Tony's a good
to you,
friend of our show. Yes.
After World War II, we had the Marshall Plan, and we had reparations from Germany, which Germany is still paying or attempting to pay. So what we're missing here in the plans of our president, who we
You're
love.
about to ask a great question. Go ahead before we run out of time.
I'm missing accountability. Where's Nuremberg? Where's the accountability?
You are so right on. Qatar's doing God's work. Aren't you aware of this? Why isn't Qatar paying reparations to Israel? That's your question. Because it funded Hamas. Why isn't Qatar paying reparations to Israel? That's a perfectly legitimate question. That's not raised. Why isn't Saudi Arabia paying reparations to the 9/11 families? The firefighters, the cops, the innocent citizens. Why isn't Saudi Arabia paying reparations to them? I like it. You're 100% right. You see, this audience is massive. It is American to the core. It is patriotic. Thank you, Tony. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers, the men and women in Ukraine, the men and women in Israel. We have your back. And you, the American people, the best of the best. God bless each and every one of you, and thank you. Don't forget, later.